is for airport a gift from Pierre. B, the belief that turns to despair. C is for cedarwood, stand up and shout. D is for Davis, let's throw him out.
Brothers and sisters, as the spirit of Rome twists in the wind, enduring a slow death over 3 decades, I ask you to listen to this reading from the final chapter of the Book of Rome, In the Shadow of an Airport. I'm a small village in Pickering Township. I am now burdened down with vexation and cares. I have no crime to atone for, no misdeed to condemn me, yet stand under a threat and in great need of prayers. There's still time. Do take heed, all those who wield power, lest a rash act bring loss, devastation, and tears. Save me and mine, for God's sake. I adjure with all reverence, lest too late should bring down through long vistas of years.
It's rather strange that back in 1968, Transport Canada officials said, well, we don't need a second airport. We should redevelop Pearson, Moulton at the time. But then when the politicians came along and told them to go and justify the need for an airport, well, then they went to work and hired consultants and spent millions of dollars proving that black was white.
This is a story of a political decision by the Government of Canada that resulted in a ruthless land grab. In the late 1960s, Mirabel, Montreal's second international airport, was announced by the Trudeau government. Toronto politicians demanded a new airport, and they started putting pressure on Ottawa. The Trudeau government agreed and set up an expensive study to find a suitable site. In 1970, a total of 59 sites were studied in Ontario. Although Pickering, northeast of Toronto, had been eliminated as an airport site in 1969, it was presented as an ideal choice for an airport. Low-cost farmland, no people, and great for speculators. On March 2, 1972, the federal and Ontario governments jointly announced plans for a second Toronto International Airport and the new town of Cedarwood in Pickering Township. Then came an avalanche of protests from everywhere. In October, expropriation notices went out. People lost land that had been in the family for generations. Others took the money and ran. Others held their ground and fought. The battle lasted 3.5 years. People or planes used every weapon in their arsenal, from leaked reports to legal briefs to street theater.
Paul and I lived here for 5 years until I think it was March 2nd of 1972. We got a thing through the news that all of this area was being expropriated and this was going to be the new airport for Toronto, and it was a major shock. I was kind of dejected about the whole thing, and along comes a Globe and Mail reporter. So I said, well, what do you have to do to you guys get their attention to stop this thing? Do you have to drop a bomb on them or something? And the next day there's a picture in the Globe and Mail, and I had this gun in my hand and it says, Lichman ready to go to war, you see, and that came out in the Globe and Mail, and then I got inundated with phone calls from all my neighbors, and so there was that was sort of like, let's all get together, and we started the People Are Planes organization, which Dr. Godfrey headed up, and I became the creative director.
On the evening of March 2nd, 1972, a meeting was held at Melody Farm where Matthew Lount had lived, a rebel who was executed by the Government of Canada in 1837. The group formed that night to fight the airport was called People Are Planes. POP membership was an eclectic mix, including farmers, lawyers, doctors, homemakers, and artists. Dr. Charles Godfrey was elected chairman of the group.
I got out the word on the jungle grapevine very quickly because people, one, they didn't know what the hell was going on. Two, although they didn't know what the hell was going on, they were against it anyway because they were against losing that farmland. So eventually we became coordinated and got a fairly strong group protest going on. We set up a very effective fact-finding committee, and they went to work and analyzed what was going on out at Malton. They pointed out that the projections put forward by the Airport Planning Committee, that was the federal government planning committee, were just all to cock. They were just not, the way they talked about it, everybody in Canada would be flying by the year 2000.
Our objection came down to two things. One, it wasn't needed, and two, even if it was, it should not be built on 18,000 acres of Class 1 food land.
We didn't want to do negative protests. We wanted to try to explain to people that this was just a huge mistake and that it was going to cost the government a lot of money and all of us a lot of money, and that this was not the place to do it, A, and B, that it really wasn't needed. It had never been proved that the two-airport system would work here.
They weren't facing the fact that an airport wasn't needed there, was never shown to be needed there, and really never will be shown to be needed there. The history of cities the size of Toronto with two airports is an absolute disaster.
E's the environment that's being destroyed. F is the farmland we all once enjoyed.
With weapons fashioned from pipes and pitchforks, Bill Lishman and Mike Robertson formed the first Pickering Fusiliers to protect the lands. Transport Canada sets up offices in a vacant school in Brome and are immediately put under siege by the Fusiliers. Lishman and Robertson stand guard over the new international gateway to Canada and demand passports.
What I enjoyed about it was the street theater. We needed media attention because and that was really important. So you have to do a few outrageous things to do that, and that was the very fun part.
So Bill came up with this wonderful idea, burying Mother Nature. It wasn't just burying Mother Nature, it was burying Mother Nature in a very theatrical event on the front lawn of Queen's Park.
We did a funeral march on Queen's Park, and Paula made 50 black robes, so it was like an Ingmar Bergman scene.
Everybody carrying a little cross and the 3 or 4 coffins that Bill had fashioned. Up University Avenue we went. And up to that point, of course, most people associated protests with people shouting and carrying placards. Well, this was entirely the opposite. The media just went nuts. They loved it. Bill always had fresh ideas. It was always something new to do, and it got people's spirits up. So we always had something to work towards.
The funeral march brought the airport issue national attention and taught Pop an invaluable lesson in media relations. In October 1972, the federal government sends out expropriation notices to 2,000 Pickering landowners. A federal report indicates that speculators own 60% of the airport site.
I don't think many of us really felt that we had a heck of a lot of chance of defeating the airport. Yet we felt like it was a responsible thing that we had to do. The protests weren't in our minds totally futile. They also, we felt the chances of success were fairly slim.
G is for garbage and gravel pits too. H is for highways around and right through.
It's a horrifying feeling. We had to go out and talk to people at night with a phone, and they were really upset. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know who to call. Nobody was paying any attention, least of all Mr. Trudeau at the time, who did come to around here and was asked by a farmer, look, what are you going to do about this? I mean, what can I do? And he said, I want to know where I stand. And Mr. Trudeau said, my dear sir, you're standing on expropriated ground. And You see, the farmer almost burst into tears.
April 1973. Pickering landowners complained that the federal government's offers are too low. The average of $1,600 an acre is about half of what it should be.
They grind you down. They wear you out. They make you ill. I've heard stories of the originally expropriated people crying on doorsteps, marriages breaking up, suicides, depression. And that's what they do to you. It wears you down. And when it's your own government, and you don't think that's not supposed to happen here, is it, in Canada? That's not supposed to happen. And it's happening.
In June 1973, Ontario amends the Housing Development Act, giving it the power to expropriate land for the new city of Cedarwood. In response, people were playing stages the public hanging of Prime Minister Trudeau and Premier Bill Davis in effigy.
What he did was he got the media involved and he made it real. He put on plays, did street theater, and the hanging and those types of things really captured people's imagination.
The public hanging makes the front page in the 6 o'clock news and focuses the national spotlight on the airport issue once again.
A couple of our members thought that might be going a little bit too far, but by then our tempers were really raising. You know, we were getting mad because the government was hitting it with all sorts of crap. That's what it came down to. And we were beginning to react not quite as honorable citizens would react.
Just a mile north of here, we ran an Earth Days festival one year and attracted huge crowds, and we had the Perth County Conspiracy down, and we had just an incredible gathering and a lot of positive energy to try to will this airport to kind of see some common sense and stop their blind, full-ahead progress at the cost of intellect.
I means insane the way we had planned. J are the roads that soon will be jammed.
One beautiful summer day outside of Bill's little schoolhouse, there was a survey crew. And they were out there doing the dastardly business of trying to figure out, I guess, where the runways went. And Bill and his good pal Zach Heenan had this great idea. Filled up a couple of balloons with helium and put some black powder charges in them. Waited till the wind was right. Floated these balloons over top of these poor guys in the field doing survey work and blew the charge. And these guys scattered like you wouldn't believe.
In October, the Gibson inquiry into the airport is announced, but it will not be allowed to consider the need or location of an airport. It doesn't hold its first public hearing until March 1974. Brenda Davies testifies and sings Durham's Lament.
K are the kids that have nowhere to play. L is the lifestyle that's slipping away. M is the mill ponds that once took up space. N is the noise lands all over the place.
The inquiry is the focus of attention for most of 1974. The Gibson report is made public in January 1975. Federal cabinet considers it, then shelves it. Marchand announces that construction will begin this year with only one runway instead of 4 originally planned, at a cost of $204 million.
And the day before the deadline was over, we found out that Marchand was going to announce at the House of Commons that they were going to go ahead with the airport. We had no time to arrange any kind of an official protest. So Bill got on the blower and started phoning people, and I threw a glider on the old Jeep and headed for Ottawa. I'm driving through a blinding snowstorm thinking, this is ridiculous, this is never going to happen. I managed to tow a flight and circle the Peace Tower and land on the lawn beside the Eternal Flame. Because we had a rookie TV crew, they didn't have all kinds of polished questions for me. They just handed me the mic and I was able to say my bit and talk about how this land ought to be kept for what it's here for growing beautiful food and some of the best farmland in Ontario, and for flying like this that doesn't impinge on the environment.
O is the obsession we have to expand. P is for progress that eats up our land.
There were fewer women in the workforce and more of us who had the time. The poor men were off working all day and then coming back to meetings. We just never stopped meeting and doing.
In April 1975, 100 women signed a petition against the airport and pledged to sit in front of the bulldozers if and when work on the airport starts. Fences and barricades are erected on the roads to the site to keep demonstrators out.
Brenda was a British eccentric and very, very, very bright woman. And I think we probably just came across each other at various meetings. I mean, you couldn't help but meet people eventually. Franny was the wife of a judge and a spine of iron and rather reserved. And we began to talk and realize that the three of us had no dependents. We could disappear for weeks.
In August 1975, bulldozers leveled the first house. Local area residents are stunned at the destruction. They visit the site, which is nothing more than a pile of rubble across the road from Ernie Crothers' farm. Ernie Crothers is the last holdout on federal land trying to save the farm that has been in his family for generations. Pop organizes a party at the farm. It is an emotional tribute to Ernie. The house is boarded up and Ernie moves out.
The party was a cover. The party was planned as a cover for Brenda and Franny and I to slip into the house.
That night, Ann Howes, Frances Moore, and Brenda Davies take up residence in Ernie Crothers' boarded-up house and defy the bulldozers. None of the women are directly affected by the expropriation, but feel compelled to make this last stand.
We had no idea what would happen. I was the youngest, therefore hale and hearty, and could do things like chop wood. Brenda was a ham radio operator, so we figured we could have some contact with the outside world. And Franny had a spine of steel.
On September 17, 1975, the electricity is shut off to the farmhouse. Michael Robertson delivers supplies on horseback.
They dug tank traps in the road. And so I had a horse and a four-wheel drive, so I was able to supply the gals up on the Crothers farm that were holding out. I didn't know those women well, but they had fantastic energy and spirit. And I think that symbolically that was one of the big stands.
On September 18, 1975, an Ontario election returns a minority Conservative government. Dr. Godfrey is elected in Durham West, defeating a pro-airport Liberal. But the destructions of the homes on the site continues. On September 21, 1975, 1,300 women pledged to lie down in front of the bulldozers to prevent the destruction of Ernie Crothers' farm. Federal security guards are put on standby alert, ready to close all public access to the construction area of the planned runway.
We were able to get to the Davis cabinet and explain to him that this thing was a sham and it would be not a good thing for Toronto and Ontario. It would be a disaster like Mirabel, and that they shouldn't support it.
On September 24, 1975, under pressure from the NDP and Liberals, Davis announces that Ontario will not provide roads, water mains, sewers, and other essential services, even if Ottawa pays the cost.
The day of the announcement, I got up early and could hear the heavy equipment rolling. I thought, never mind, are gonna knock down another house. It's just so stupid, you know, the announcement's coming out today. So I jumped on Colonel, that was my horse, bareback, didn't even saddle him up, and rode out with my dog. And they were getting ready to hit a house. The backhoe had the thing elevated, and there was a big front end loader there. I rode in underneath, jumped off, and Sherman, my dog, and I ran inside. I got in there, sat in an upper story window, and I hollered out, "Okay, guys, you know, it's over. I'm in the house. You can't hit it now. You're going to have to call whoever you're going to call, and if they're going to remove you." But you know, we have good reason to believe that this has been canceled. So this is a really silly idea to knock down another house. Anyway, he just kept knocking away at the house underneath. And by the time the media got there and the suits arrived to tell him to stop, the house had been lost anyway.
In Ottawa, the federal cabinet shelves the airport and the destruction ends. Marchand and Trudeau are enraged.
The ham radio that Brenda had was connected to people all over the world. So we got wind of it through the ham radio before we got wind of it anywhere else. We didn't believe it.
Within an hour of the announcement, the padlock gates to the site are opened by security guards, and anti-airport campaigners drive through from all directions, honking horns.
I don't know that I've ever been quite so proud of a bunch of people in my life.
That evening, 200 POP troops squeeze into 2 rooms in the farmhouse to cheer on their conquering general, Dr. Charles Godfrey. 3 years, 7 months, and 25 days after they began the fight, POP members have a victory party.
Oh, we had a great party that night. Yeah.
We had a goddamn good time. Even if we lost, which we didn't, even if we lost, we still would have counted a great adventure, and that's the way we looked at it.
So a lot of people became aware of it, and gradually there was a big public feeling that this shouldn't happen, and the public pressure on the politicians, and it essentially got canceled. But we did get expropriated. We're standing on federal land now. They own this property, and you know the bureaucrats are still there saying, "Well, we'll get that airport in yet."
Who is the quiet who once knew at night? Ours the roar of twin engines in flight.
In October 1975, Mirabel opens late at double the budget. Trudeau says Torontonians will be on their knees begging for a second airport. Following the Royal Commission, the airport fell off the public radar. For the next 20 years, Transport Canada continued to quietly plan an airport. In July 1998, a small article appeared in the Toronto Star announcing the federal government's intention to declare the Pickering lands as an airport site. It was met with immediate opposition.
Why on earth do we announce this in July when everybody's on holidays? It sounds like another sneaky Transport Canada ploy. Now, this is an issue that requires public debate and public input. I'm not prepared tonight to say whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. But I have studied this issue for 25 years. I know an awful lot about it. I would like an opportunity to have input. So would another 1,000 people in this community.
I want to commend Council for at least standing up this time and making their annoyance felt. In the last episode, they rolled over and played dead with horrible circumstances lasting for 25 years and many people hurt unnecessarily.
You know, the sheer fact that Lord Almack and the Thompsons, etc., had gone to the City Council meeting at the beginning of August and got Pickering City Council to ask Transport Canada for a delay, for a chance to consider the response, is really what saved the day, right? You know, those guys from People Are Planes, they were there 30 years ago. They were there at the critical moment then, and you know, that allowed Vocal to become organized. And I called all my local politicians, and I'm saying, look, you know, you can't make this an airport. And I remember I was standing in my bedroom, looking out the front windows, talking to Mr. Anderson on the phone. And I said, you know, why would they need an airport, blah, blah, blah. And he told me directly. He said, they're building an airport there, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. And I said, that's not how the system works. And he said, that's how it works here. That really, gets my back up when people who supposedly work for us, right, turn around and tell you that you as a voter, there's not a single thing you can do about it. To be honest, I remember standing in there when we opened the hall, said, it'll be interesting to see how many people show up. And the room was packed. And that was quite gratifying, certainly. And it really invigorated me. It said, okay, people are concerned about this. They're as concerned as I am.
Thank you. This is exactly the kind of support we require going forward. We have to make our local, our regional, our provincial, and our federal officials aware of the fact that we, as communities, oppose an airport on these lands. To make them aware of how strongly we feel this and how, if they don't represent us, we can work to get someone who can.
It was all a matter of racing against the clock initially because Pickering City Council had a time that they were going to respond to Transport Canada, and we really had to focus on getting our message to Pickering City Council, then getting that to Transport Canada. The process of getting the word out was much more difficult in the beginning, again, because of faxes, and I would gather names and addresses and really work on concentrating on getting press coverage. At the very beginning, I called every press agency, gathered their fax number, tried to get the names of reporters, and compiled this enormous fax list, and then would do every other day or every third day a press release.
And to reinforce the opposition that it has always had. We have clear indication from them that they are willing to do that. And what we want to do is go in and show the federal officials and the provincial officials who so far have not come to the table that we're vocal and we want no airport. We're vocal.
The sheer size of the rally caught them off guard. When we showed up with the placards and stuff, assembled across the street at the Hub Plaza and marched across.
You're doing a good job stirring up the crowd and whatnot, but at the same time, when everybody's welcoming, okay, but at the same time, no signs, no placards.
When we showed up at the door, they had the Durham Regional Police there, taking placards, insisting that if we didn't put them down, we wouldn't get in. And we weren't there to yell and scream. We're there to make a very valid point that there was much more to this argument than meets the eye. And what they were being asked to approve, they didn't have the information in which to make that kind of recommendation that they would go ahead with.
Thank you, Mayor Arthurs, Dan McTeague, everyone present. We'd like to start this presentation, first of all, with a viewing of the video that has been put together by Film Star.
25 years ago, the federal government seized, through expropriation, 18,600 acres of the richest farmland in Canada to build an airport. After a successful campaign by People or Planes, Ontario refused to provide the necessary infrastructure, and the federal government shelved the project.
The video was outstanding. It really shocked the politicians at all levels, whether it was regional or municipal and even federal. They were shocked that we had the professionalism to put together that kind of presentation, and so they really didn't have any choice but to counter and look at the information that was being put in front of them. And it didn't matter how you added it up, the numbers didn't work. And that left him in a position of then trying to defend an indefensible position. And that's the last thing a politician's ever going to use.
Transport Canada has a study which says that because Hamilton does not form a part of the Greater Toronto Airports Authority, that the Greater Toronto Airports Authority would want to build an airport to take the traffic away from Hamilton. Rather than use the existing airport facilities efficiently, they want to build their own empire. We say let's stop them, right here, right now.
The first time I ever drank champagne was September 25th, 1975. I remember this because it made headlines. The occasion? People celebrating a victory over planes. The Liberal government had scrapped the Pickering Airport. Sadly, governments never admit to their political mistakes. And here we are once again, 23 years later, strongly opposing an airport on the Pickering lands. An airport is neither wanted nor needed, not now, not ever, no airport in Pickering, period.
I am so pleased that another generation is taking over this fight. Democracy is alive and well in Pickering. Remember in 1972, Transport Canada, to prove a second airport was needed, forecast 64 million passengers would be flying out of Toronto by year 2000. Well, they're going to have to get moving because they're only 26 million a year now. They're not going to make it. Let's stop this airport, and I'm delighted to see so many young people here. I'm going to Florida and retire.
At the end of the meeting in Pickering, as it was breaking up and there was the vote and everyone was cheering, I went down to hand all the various politicians a vocal button. And one of the councillors stood up and went, "You didn't get 1,000 people here tonight, did you?" and I just pushed it right back. I said, "We got more than you've ever seen."
Let me be clear. The GTAA has no role in the Pickering lands. The decision to build an airport will be taken when the federal government is convinced that the surrounding community, the wider community, the provincial government, and traffic needs dictate the construction of another airport. And that certainly I don't believe will come for 15, 20 years, maybe never.
It was a small victory for Vocal. The government bowed to public pressure, deferred airport designation, and buried the process in a stakeholders committee to explore the alternatives.
It became readily apparent, right, into the second and third meeting that this was an act by Transport Canada to coordinate the actions of the municipalities and the regions in moving this towards an airport. They couldn't give two damns whether we were there or not. I showed up for every meeting. I did not miss a meeting, not one, because I didn't want to show up at a meeting and say, "Oh, you missed the last one, so we passed all this." When they realized they couldn't get it down to the municipal level, they said, "Okay, on to the next step." They moved to enact the airport zoning regulations and said the next step is inviting in the Greater Toronto Airports Authority to build a business case so that they can be operational in 2012. From their perspective, it was brilliant. Right? They could download a 30-year-old problem onto an unaccountable agency that was filled with former Transport Canada personnel. Right? It was an incestuous relationship, to say the least, but it was an unaccountable body. And the government could say, "It's not us, it's the GTAA." And the GTAA would say, "It's not us, talk to Transport Canada, they make the decision." Well, the whole time, they continued to advance the process strongly.
Government is using our money to irritate and annoy and make our living miserable. It's using our money to do it.
We looked at the growth, we looked at the population, and it's clear to us, certainly, and that's the proposal we put forward, that if you look down the road, by the time you get to 20 years down the road, Pearson will be too busy, there'll be a need for a secondary airport or a leader airport. As well as that.
But basically they said, we need to build a small airport now, we need to keep our options open, and we will need an airport to support Pearson in 20, 25 years. So to think 20 years, 20, 30 years out that you're going to need to be using 10,000 acres for an international airport proximate to Toronto was nuts.
The International Atomic Agency, the IAEA, is considering instituting a mandatory no-fly zone over all nuclear facilities. This no-fly zone is between 10 and 20 kilometers. Your airport is 12 on the south, 18 on the north. What do you got to say to that?
As far as all our studies today suggest that can be accommodated with this airport, it's not
Hang on a second. I got some more statistics for you. Okay? It goes on to say that if an aircraft strays from that perimeter, it will be shot down. Are you planning on shooting down every airplane that takes off of that bloody airport? Are you?
I can assure you, this airport authority will never go to an airport that's not safe and not secure, period.
He said Markham Airport was closing, Oshawa Airport was closing, and that Buttonville Airport was closing. You're going to close 3 airports to legitimize opening a Cessna airport for 15 years? They didn't have a business case. So, in an effort to grab the land, we'll drop a 500-acre airport on 11,100 acres of Crown land. That land's worth $5.6 billion today, and they want to get it for nothing.
Mirabel ceases commercial operations in November 2004, losing billions of taxpayer dollars.
Airports Authority has presented a business case that just doesn't fly, right? You know, this business case has holes big enough you can drive a truck through. Pearson's running about 40 to 45% of capacity, right? They just completed a $4.4 billion renovation. We have and the airport system in Southern Ontario is operating at about 35% of total capacity.
They have not learned. In 30 years, they haven't learned. And what says that the opposition went away? We're still here.
No airport! No airport! No airport! No airport! 20 years of living there, they're evicting me in 60 days. They're giving me 60 days to move everything I own. It's my life invested. They're taking away my freedom, my life before and after now. I own all this stuff.
It's hard to maintain the same kind of sense of belief in your community and in your land and in your home when you don't own it, when you're not given a long-term lease and you're treated very badly. So the spirit went.
Now, speaking with Steve Shaw from the GTAA, he says that there will be public hearings as well as an environmental assessment. What do you make of that?
I've been a member of the Pickering Advisory Council and the Community Affairs Working Group for 4 years. Because you're invited to a meeting does not necessarily mean they're listening to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve.
You're welcome. No airport! No airport!
If they are presenting a business case, their business case had better incorporate rent for those lands at market value, or else we'll find an airport operator that will pay it. Why should the government take a haircut on our property when this community has suffered so much by a faulty decision made by Trudeau-era mega projects 30 years ago? If they were making this decision on economic grounds, we wouldn't be having this discussion today.
About 10 years ago, they stopped renting out houses. It was very apparent that no place that went empty was going to be rented. Everything was going to be boarded up. We got the information that they were taking the tenders, taking the bids for the destruction of 25 homes. So it seemed a very appropriate place to gather attention, and we thought that with the Save the Land view, the best thing to have there was a tractor. So it was Tapscott that went up there with his tractor and blocked the road.
Instead of spending $500,000 to tear these places down,
we could be saving them and earning money with them.
Absolutely.
You know, it's sad.
You drive your kids down to school, you come back at night, and 3 houses are a pile of rubble.
They showed me their eviction notice and it said mold. First thing I did was I phoned the name at the bottom, the fellow who had done the inspection, who was the head of DCI, I believe it was called, Decommissioning Services. I phoned him up. I said, what is this mold? Is this dangerous? And what do you do about it? And he says, it's nothing. I got the same mold in my house. You wash it. You wash it with Javex.
Anybody want to go inside and see what the regional manager has to say? Let's pop in and see what's cooking. So we can't come in? So you sure we can't come in?
For what reason?
And could you give me a reason? We're locked out, folks. He won't let us in. And I mean, this has been going on for 35 years, and it's unnecessary. It's a waste. These places could have been occupied all that time. How are you today? Well, I don't know. We don't know whether we've done much here, but we've been trying to draw some attention to this this destruction thing going on. I really felt at this point that we weren't going to have an airport here. So to me, the bigger picture was more where we had to work. We had to work on saving the land, saving the houses, stopping the demolitions, reverse this eviction, this clear the land, this obvious clear the land mandate that Transport had issued to Public Works.
I can recall on a Friday afternoon getting notice that there was houses that were going to be ripped down imminently. Some of them were already being destroyed. The more I investigate the problems with how the lands, the Pickering Airport lands, have been managed, the more concern I have. Simply put, there seems to be a policy of depopulation.
We didn't save any of the 25. We really felt like we would be able to save a couple of them, but we weren't able to. It was just such a waste. It was just such a waste. I mean, when you realize what a wonderful home many of these would have been for people, it seemed just such to spend $25,000 to tear a place down that should be supplying revenue just seemed, again, it's just so nuts, so government out of control. Where's the stewardship?
And sure enough, when we probe some of these so-called deadly situations, by insisting upon third-party independent assessment of those homes, we found out that there's nothing deadly or toxic about the situations that they're in. And a lot of these situations are frankly fabricated. If they're not fabricated, then somebody made egregious errors to come to the conclusions that they did.
And it was when Mark was trying to investigate this that he started getting lied to. And that's when he realized that what we've been saying for years now is true, that Public Works has got a systematic campaign to depopulate these lands. They do not want to have tenants, they don't want people or planes, they don't want land over landings, they don't want noise, they don't want tenants, they just want us out of there. And then they can do what they want with the lands.
And I do believe it's systematic genocide, right? First of all, the government allowed the barns to dilapidate, right? Didn't maintain them for 30 years. Then they got to a point where they said, well, your barn's unsafe. We have to knock it down. The same has been happening to the houses. Over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been this systematic elimination of people on the properties. And I have a report, right, from 1990. It's called the viability or the feasibility of a North Toronto airport. And that outlines and says one of the plans is to reduce resistance to an airport in the future by eliminating the tenants and reducing the population on the lands.
The senseless destruction of the homes hit a nerve with the community, and local area politicians were bombarded with a massive email protest.
One of the things that did turn the tide for us, yes, was that political pressure. Email campaigns. It became much easier for us to get the message out. That really helped turn the tide. Mark Holland, our MP, originally was, the party's for an airport, so am I.
That I think an international airport in Pickering is a bad idea. I oppose it. Let me say, no, there's not a but. Let me say that I did say before as well that I would support a regional airport. I don't think there is a pressing need for a regional airport, and I don't think that the case has been made for it at all.
It was a turning point, certainly, and helped to draw in other support from the Liberal Party and said, this is a much bigger story than just you trouncing a bunch of local people. Right? We can turn this into an issue that can swing some seats. And that was instrumental in getting the government where it is today, saying, well, let's have a look at this and see if the numbers add up.
If I care so much about this job, that I care more about holding on to this job than fighting for something, then get rid of me. If that's your opinion, get rid of me. But if you think I'm the best person for this job, if you think I'm going to fight harder than anybody else will fight, if you think that I'm going to be more open and transparent and be here, then keep me. And that's your choice.
And I went to GTA caucus and said, frankly, I need your help. This is an issue that I really think is being mishandled, is causing a lot of people a lot of grief unnecessarily, and we need to fix it. And I need your help to do that. And so I asked for GTA caucus to support my request for a moratorium on all evictions, on all demolitions, and that includes the 13 that are currently in process.
That's one of the biggest things that's come out of this for me, is to see that the political process, I think today with email and with the ease of communication, we're seeing politics start to change. We're starting to see where it's getting to be the way it was intended to be, that actually every individual has a voice in what's going on.
In September 2005, the Liberal government announced that there would be a comprehensive review of a need for an airport in Pickering before any decision to proceed with an environmental assessment.
Well, the peer review is from a practical point of view, the thing we had to do to stop the airport from going ahead was to stop the EA, the environmental assessment. And the peer review effectively stopped that.
Transport Canada continued to push forward the Pickering Airport zoning regulations, and in September 2005 deposited them at local land registry offices. The airport zoning affects approximately 80,000 parcels of land in the municipalities of Pickering, Markham, Stouffville, Uxbridge, Scugog, Whitby, and Ajax. Land values drop up to 17% in airport zones, costing property owners hundreds of millions of dollars in value.
"30-odd years ago, when we talked about the pressures on foodlands, when we talked about water, we talked about urban sprawl, people laughed at us. But I think the last 30 years have proved that there is a great need for foodlands near large urban centers.
I think there will be a day, personally, where we're going to have to take a look at what we do with these lands in terms of either a park system or something along those lines to dispose of them. But I think we have to keep something else in mind in this process, and that is if the expropriation didn't occur, what would those lands look like today? And I frankly think that sprawl that we see headed westward would have also sprawled out this way, and those lands would have been largely developed if unprotected. So, I mean, there's silver lining here, and my hope is one day we'll be able to truly reap the benefit of that unintended consequence, and that could be a truly remarkable thing. I'd love to see the land connected into the Oak Ridges Moraine and left as Canada's largest urban park. The reality is those lands are tremendously beautiful. They have a great deal of value as being left natural.
You know, this is the largest single tract of Class 1 farmland from Toronto to the East Coast. And that's a very important consideration as we move forward. right? Being able to feed ourselves and being able to have that in proximity to our cities is critical.
We seem determined in Southern Ontario to pave every ounce of farmland we've got, and Lord knows as we head into the next millennium, we don't need airports. We need fresh water, fresh food, and fresh air. That's what we need, and we have got, by sheer dumb luck, an enormous opportunity here for all those things right on the doorstep of the most populated area in Canada. And in the process, we will create a new paradigm. We will actually take advantage of this unbelievable and unlikely opportunity to create a land trust, a huge urban park, organic farms. My goodness, the possibilities are endless.
We have 2 nuclear plants in the region. Why not balance that and offset it by being a leading edge developer of wind power? Develop a technology that leads us through the 21st century rather than looking at a 20th century technology. The feds had no interest, right? From day one, they look at you as though you're some sort of alien. This is an airport site. What are you talking about?
Our spirit lives on. We will prevail.
Today, the citizens of Pickering continue their battle against the Government of Canada to stop the airport and save the land.
S are the sewer pipes mile upon mile, T are the trees that will lay in a pile, U is the urban sprawl we invite, V the values of which we've lost sight, W when all these changes we see, X the Xerox of New York will be, Y is for you who must stand up and fight, Z is the zeal to protect all that's right.